Okay, I want to do a quick video on naming, on what it means to name. So basically, we can name a cell, or we can actually even name a range. We can name this range from B4 down to B7 and call it, you know, you know, whatever you want to call it. You can call it tree, and that would be the name of that range of cells. And before we get into that, let's kind of see what we would do if we didn't do a range. So I'm not going to do the entire amortization schedule. I'm only going to focus on just a part of this. You can do the rest of the schedule based on the textbook, but I just want to focus on the naming side of this. Okay, so let's say we want to figure out the payment. We have a loan. We just took the loan out. It's $100,000, and the interest rate is something like, I don't know, let's say 10%. And it's for 5 years. So we're going to have to make a payment every year for 5 years. So how much will that payment be? So there's a built-in schedule called payment, a built-in function, I mean, called payment. And we can use this formula, and it asks for the rate, the number of times, that's what the N per, that's the number of times, the term of the loan, and the present value, what the loan is worth. So we could just, for the rate, hit that cell, right? And if we wanted to make it an absolute cell, we could put the dollar signs there. The number of payments, 5, right? That's the term. And then the present value, what's the work? That's what the PV means. It means present value. What's the loan worth right now? Well, just took it out. It's worth $100,000. And this would work fine, right? Now notice it's negative, and the reason it's negative is because it's money leaving, right? It's something you have to make. So if you want to make that positive, just in front of the payment, just put a negative sign, and that'll turn it around. Well, this is fine. This would work, except that for this, we're going to learn something called naming, and I want you to, or you have to use this in your assignment. And what that means is we're going to name each of these areas. So what we're going to do is we're going to name these. Now there's a couple of ways you can name it. There's one way you can do is just to right click on the cell, and you could just say define name, and it kind of helps you out. It sees that amount is right next to it. But if you wanted to name it something else, change that, change it, but I would suggest keeping an amount. Now if you wanted to use this $100,000 throughout the entire worksheet, in other words, throughout all worksheet 1, 2, 3, whatever sheet you put in this worksheet, you would keep the scope to be workbook. But let's say you want to do different loan amounts on sheet 2, sheet 3, sheet 4, then you would just select sheet 1. And so this name amount only works when we're in this sheet. And so it selected B4 for you. If you wanted to turn that to a range of cells, you would just highlight whatever range you wanted. But we're just going to keep it at B4 because that would be the right thing to do. So we select that. Then we're going to name the rate. Now we could either right click it like I did before, or you could go to Name Manager, and then you could say New Name, and there it pops up already. It's guessing rate is your name that you want. You could keep it or change it, and it's guessing B5. Again, you can keep that, or you could change it. If you wanted to change it to this one, you could. But we're going to keep it there. Click that arrow again and click OK. So now we got two names. The nice thing about Name Manager is you can see all the names you have, and you can see what the scope is. Oh, look, we need to edit this because I forgot to make that. I'll have it set at workbook. So let's see. Name won't let me change it, will it? Let me see if I do that again, if it will. No, it looks like I'm going to have to actually delete it. And then I'll go in and I'll put a new one there. This time I'll make it to sheet 1 and click OK. There you go. And then here's a third thing we can do, right? Way we could do the name, and that's we can just hit on this define name here. Now I'm in formulas for all of these. So Name Manager, define name does the same thing. It guess term, we'll keep it at term, and I'm going to change it back to worksheet as my scope, and it guessed B6. So everything is good here. So names can be useful when you're using formulas. Names can be useful for a lot of things. you kind of almost have to use them to see what they're useful for. But for example, let's say I want to change this payment. I can do payment, right? And instead of for rate hitting the cell, I can just type in rate because that's the name of my the cell named rate. And then I named the next rate term, so that's the number of times we're going to pay. So I'm going to put that as term. And then the present value is the amount of the loan. And since I named that cell amount, I can just hit that and it gives us the same thing. So instead of using cell names, we used a range, and this again comes in handy for a lot of different reasons. This is a pretty simple example as far as being straightforward, but you'll find that when you get into bigger spreadsheets and it's easier to manage your names than to manage the cells and change all the cells in the different formulas if you need to. But if you just change the name and the range and that way it really makes things much more efficient for you. So make sure you use these in your work this week.